And Dr. Leah nodding in agreement down there as well. Dr. Swathi, welcome, award-winning pharmacist. Dr. Swathi Varanasi, of course, Dr. Swathi for short. Always good to see you. And you specialize in integrative health and botanical medicine. And so very similar also to Dr. Leah, who is also Dr. Pharmacology, and I'm missing your information. But I know you because you're my friend. So really just amazing to have all of you here to be able to share your medical experience, because I know that there's a lot of people joining this town hall today that have a lot of questions about cannabis, how it can be used effectively for them. And, you know, today is all about being able to make sure that people have access, not just to medicine, but also to the education they need to accurately medicate themselves. So without further ado, Stephen, I know that you were really excited to be able to start asking everyone some questions.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you so much for everyone who's put effort into this. It is super excited to bring this program into fruition. I've watched how hard the Dear Cannabis team, how hard Nicole, Pam, and everyone works. Joe, so thank you so much. I kind of want to get right into it. And this is going to be open to anyone who would like to address first. But what is SB 34 and how has it changed the industry for compassion programs? Yeah, let's go, Joe.
Hey, everybody, Sweet Leaf Joe here. So yeah, SB 34 has changed a number of things. You know, the year before it was SB 829 when we tried to get it through Sacramento. Same bill, got vetoed. Basically, the issue was with Prop 64, they did not make a distinction between commercial and non-commercial cannabis. So taxes were applied to all cannabis. So when they were writing Prop 64, they didn't really understand we had a nonprofit sector, or we just weren't really prioritized. So they didn't make that distinction. So for 2019, when SB 420 sunset, Sweet Leaf, we were doing a fundraiser to raise money to pay taxes so that we could continue giving away cannabis. And that greatly reduced the amount of cannabis we could get out to our patients. You know, we went down to like, I think 25% of our previous capacity. And now with SB 34, we don't have to pay those taxes. We have a distinction between commercial and non-commercial cannabis. We have a for-profit part of our industry as well as a nonprofit part of our industry. And SB 34, I think, is really important because it's the first time a government has acknowledged the nonprofit sector of the cannabis industry. And, you know, moving towards the future, it's going to be important on the national level and then on the global level that when people are changing their ideas about cannabis, that we need to create a place for the nonprofit sector for compassion.
On a smaller scale, what does the actual SB in SB 34 stand for anyone who may not know?
It's a Senate bill. So you'll see bills in Sacramento. There's SB if they're introduced in the Senate, and AB if they're introduced in the Assembly. I'm by no means an expert on all this stuff. I did a crash course by trying to do SB 829 and SB 34. And it was really interesting to see how laws are made and, you know, how slow it happens.
I mean, just to piggyback on that, in my own personal view, SB 34 is the answer to equity in the Black community. To be able to have medical patients receive these free donations. A lot of the times, from what I've seen, the Black dollar is more important than Black wellness. So folks are more willing to make money off of us, but not give us what we need. And I thought that this bill is helping us to get what we need exactly.
Couldn't agree. So what are some of the requirements to receive compassion medicine as a patient?
Medical recommendation. There's different ways to receive this. I know here in California, it only costs about $30 at the lowest. Get your medical card, call up your doctor, let them know what you're going through. I know for Black Canada Joy, we're lucky enough to have our own doctor. So, you know, for us, by us all day, every day. You get your recommendation, you fill out our intake form, and sorry, my phone is ringing, sorry. You fill out our intake form and that gets you in the program. Trying to make it real simple, real easy, real accessible. You know, my thinking is the elders, you know, these elders, our grandmas, our aunties, our mothers, our fathers, you know, in that generation that was given all this propaganda, you know, they need this. My community needs this. So, you know, trying to make it as simple as possible. Get your medical recommendation, get it to us, and we're able to get your box of magic to you. So
Perfect. Would anyone like to add anything? And if
Yeah,
not
I'll add a little bit there. Sweet Leaf, we're a little bit different. To Mandela's point, you know, we do have a lot of elderly people, and it's really difficult, you know, getting people's paperwork onto the Meadow platform, and you know, these things can get complicated. We also have an income requirement, so our patients need to be low income. We're trying to focus to have the most impact, to be the most impactful, do the most amount of good. And so, yeah, we're looking specifically for people that are dying that can't afford this medicine that will extend their life. But with SB 34, when we were coming up with the bill, some of the groups, they didn't want to put an income requirement in there, so we didn't actually put one in. So for SB 34, all you need is a medical recommendation from a California doctor. And I think you need to be a California resident as well.
I love
we
that
do have, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, simple requirements, y'all, because we want to be able to give out this medicine, you know? Right.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
If I could, so sorry to interrupt. We do have a question from the audience. What's the income limit for Sweet Leaf, if we can ask?
Right now, I believe it's the California basis for low income. So I don't know the exact number right now, but it's higher than the national average. But I mean, honestly, most of our patients are on SSI. And so that's like a really easy way for them to qualify, because, you know, they're getting around $1,000 a month. So they're getting, you know, less than 15 grand a year, and they're living in San Francisco, arguably one of the world's most expensive cities. So, you know, living in San Francisco on $1,000 a month, you know, you definitely can't afford cannabis, and you need to get it for free.
Definitely.
Oh, and so one other thing I wanted to bring up about SB 34 is the state, when we were putting that through Sacramento, they really wanted the medical marijuana ID card, and we really fought against that. And so that was not included in SB 34, because that was going to be another hurdle for people to jump through. It was going to, you know, cost money, so it's going to financially set people back. And, you know, we're dealing with people not just with medical issues, but mental health issues as well. And they have social workers. Their SSI check comes to their social worker, and that's who pays their rent, because they don't have the wherewithal to cover their own stuff. So asking these people to go set up an appointment to get a medical marijuana ID card is next to impossible. They can't.
Also, prior to SB 34, the ability to get free medicine was already on Recursa as it stood with MMIC. So, I mean, you didn't need SB 34 to give medicine to people with the MMIC card at all. So that was already a part of the initial rollout of that ordinance. So without SB 34, it would have been limited to strictly the MMIC cards, because that was already in existence. And the issue was that was too restrictive.
Well, I think the other thing with SB 34 is they took out the taxes. So you could still give away compassion, but you're still on the hook for the taxes. Right? Because there wasn't any distinction between commercial and non-commercial in 64. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right. But as far as the ability to give and to be compassionate, there was no, the thing that I think is very mistaken by, the overall industry is the fact that there wasn't an opportunity for it. It just was something that would cost the retailers money because they were not able to get that discount get that money back on their excise tax, because the excise tax is a burden that you pay up front, right? Unless you're a non-arm's length business. And so for that reason, when the initial MRCRSA rolled out and under 64, it didn't give them the tax incentive to do it. So businesses were choosing to not do it because there was no win for them on taxes and was ending up costing them money, which, absolutely the sustainability of that's low, but it also did have the requirement for MMIC. So the initial rollout of the program for MRCRSA and for 64 did allow for free medicine. And I want to make sure that nobody's mistaken in thinking that that wasn't the case, but it did not keep the dispensary or the retailer from having to pay the excise on the medicine that was chosen to be given. And at the time, there wasn't the ability and currently, even to this day, the way that the process works on Metric is you essentially lie to the fucking computer by saying it costs 1 penny, even though it's a free item in the process, not having the transfer.
That's not my understanding. The way that we're navigating donations through SB 34 and Metric is that they're put into Metric. With SB 34, Metric got a third additional designation. So before they had,
it doesn't matter about the designation. It's the transfer.
medical.
You're not allowed to transfer anything to a retailer without it being a wholesale transfer. Retailers are only allowed to take things that are at wholesale. And I have this in writing from the BCC and from Metric both in the way that we transfer something. I'm not referring to the actual sale item. I'm talking about the way that you push the transfer through in Metric from the distributor to the retailer. And because of that, there isn't a way to get the product from point A to point B, like cleanly from the one to the other. And so they literally, Metric and the BCC have told you to do the transfer at a penny, and the products can be sold to the consumer at $0, right? They're going out for free, but the paperwork on the back end still isn't right to this day. After everything and all of the updates to Metric, after everything that's happened, it is still not 100% accurate from point A to point B of what's actually happening. There's a workaround for every step along the way. And I promise you, it's the way that you get the transfer to the retailer that is still an issue, not getting it to the consumer anymore. We still have a hiccup from distributor to retailer on how to properly tie out the line item of 0 to the line item of something that says wholesale transfer at a penny per package, because it won't let you, Metric will not let you go 0,000 in a wholesale transfer. So even when you're designating the item with a little Christmas package next to it and you're selling it for free, when you transfer it from one to the other, it comes at 1 penny.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for that, Nicole. The
and it
next
needs to be
question
addressed.
is,
I would really, every one of you guys, it needs to be addressed with Metric, that it needs to be changed. That's something that needs to be, we need to have a designation for transfer for donation. Because right now we have transfer and we have wholesale. There should be donation, because that way when you're going through that process and it's no taxes and there's no dollars, it makes sense. Otherwise it's looking for a dollar amount.
and that dollar amount would be essentially put right onto the consumer, right?
Well, no, because you can't give. And here's the messed up part is once you put the little box on the item, it is now designated as a donation. So if you accidentally sell it, that's tax evasion, right? Because you didn't pay your excise on it coming in. So if you sell something for money, say you sell it for $1, because say you got 100 that were donated and 100 that you paid money for, and you accidentally sold this one instead of this one because you have 2 SKUs in your computer system, right? One was free and one cost money. If I accidentally sell the free one, beep, and I ring that out at $0, I'm like, I'm like, why is it $0? No, it's $2. And so I manually adjust the price and I sell it for $2 or whatever the number is. You'll get a letter, and I've seen it twice now, from the BCC saying, hey, you're not allowed to sell things that are free. So the designation goes with it, but the way to get it there is the part that's still in confusion. But once it gets there, it has to be free, Stephen. If you sell it, that's when the red flag pops up. There is a flag on the back end that tells the state, hey, you just sold something for money that needed to be free, and it is free in the computer. Why did you make money off of this? And if you are making money, why did you not pay your taxes on it?
Understood. Thank you for educating all of us. I want to bring up one of the next topics, and it's taking it back to the consumer. So how can we educate our consumer base so that they understand the importance of the ingredients that are going into their product? The importance of testing, strains and profiles, everything like that.
I mean, I'll take
Yeah.
the beginning. I'll start with that. I would say it's kind. I see. I mean, I'm not going to speak for Dr. Swathi, but I think it's about the same for both of us. That, I mean, when it comes to any medication, I mean, you're not going to want somebody just to like manufacture your blood pressure medication and be like, oh, we didn't test it. Here you go. You could just, I'm sure it's fine. I mean, we kind of follow what we were supposed to do to make it. So like, I'm sure it's fine. I mean, we got some discount products over here to compound it, but it'll be fine. Like, you're not going to do that with medication. So this is cannabis medication. Again, at the end of the day, medication. So if it's medication, it needs to be regulated. It needs to be monitored. It needs to be, make sure it's safe, it's tested, because the last thing you want to do is have a really beneficial plant that can benefit your system where then it has underlying chemicals in it because it wasn't tested properly, and then those can cause their own issue. So altogether, it's all medication. If it's a medication, it should be properly tested to make sure it's safe for the consumer.
Dr.
And I can piggyback.
Sorry.
Sorry, I can piggyback off of that. So I'm Dr. Swathi. And so in addition to that, I would say when I talk to patients and when I've even spoken to other practitioners, other people in the space, or people who are not in the space really, they're also wondering what brands they can trust and how, if I could put it in one sentence, how I would say I trust this brand over another brand. And it comes down to the COA. The COA should be publicly accessible. It should be on their website and the brand's website. But if it's not on the website, then you should be able to send as a patient a very quick message via their message board or by email and be able to get that COA, because at the end of the day, it is public information. And so you should have access to it. So if the brand doesn't get back to you, or if the brand says, oh, you can't see it or you can't access it, then that is not a brand to be trusted. So I think that's a good, just like short, sweet, to the point. If you're wondering what's in the product, then the brand should have done that testing and they should be able to provide you with that information.
Yeah, full transparency is what it should be. Just full transparency. If you've got nothing to hide about how your manufacturing is, there's absolutely no reason you wouldn't be posting to show that your product is safe. The only problem is now we have to worry about labs and the testing, because then some of the labs sadly are not reputable, and that kind of comes into its own problem.
I want to ask all the doctors in regards to something that I as somebody who teaches purveyors, struggle with a lot, which is the use, like the intended use of a product, right? Like what it says on the package is legally the only thing I can tell you to do with this, right? And that's because of the way that they've developed their product, whether it be shelf stability or temperature things, right? Like if you're supposed to eat it, don't tell a person to smoke it. If it says to smoke it, don't tell them to eat it. And there's a few different pieces that I think have come in that in compassion specifically, it's like I feel like sometimes we're making do, you know what I mean? Like we're like you were saying, like it shouldn't just be the day old bread, and we're like, this is what you're supposed to do with it says to do with it, but like you can also use it like this. And like we have to be really careful as purveyors and retailers to stay away from that, because the product's liability, which is the insurances that come on these products, is only under what the heck that says. And so if you as a retailer are like, okay, so I know it says that it's a tincture, but you can smoke it. And a lot of the manufacturers are doing this to skirt some of these packaging regulations, right? And so they're actually causing really serious fucking issues for us to help sick people explain what they're actually supposed to do with it. Because the bottle says that you're supposed to, eat this as one pill. And I'm like, please don't do that. Like, please, for the love of God, do not eat this 1,000 milligram pill, because yes, I get the regulations has let this slide by. However, that would really go bad for you. And like, I think that education is really important. And I would like to ask the doctors, like, am I crazy in saying like, read the label exactly what it says, and that's the only thing, right?
I mean, yeah, that's how I would do it. And but the one thing I will say though, because I used to work in herbal supplement therapies, and the one thing you'll find is that if it has not been proven by like I don't know like by a clinical study that is allowed. So obviously no clinical studies are allowed in the US for positive use of cannabis. So technically no benefit can really be put on the label because it's under the same kind of guard as herbal supplements. So even like I can tell you from
well, less about the benefit, more about the instructions of how to use it, right? Because we are required in the state of California to have directions of use. And there's certain things like tablets and pills that have gone in that are in different categories. So a good example is in California, you can have tablets pills technically be up to 1,000 milligrams because of the way that they regulate under concentrates. And so people are like, okay, get this tablet and cut it, and put it and drink it or whatever it is. And so I'm saying from like a manufacturer to the vendor to the consumer, like that actually is causing us some issues because the manufacturers are finding workarounds for the labeling requirements to get the most out of it, right? Like, let me sell the most.
Gotcha. Sorry, Nicole, I misunderstood your comment. No, I agree. I think you need to do with the labels. The problem is what I've noticed on some packaging, they're actually missing the instructions. Sometimes they'll be on the outer box. You throw the outer box away and then you're like, wait, how do I use this? There's no information on the inner box. So no, I completely agree. You really need to use it the way, because the whole point is they tested it for stability. They tested it for the effectiveness for specifically what it's listing, how it's to be used. And so if you start kind of, oh no, don't listen to the package, you can use it this way, it can actually cause a lot of problems. Plus there are oils or tinctures that you can use topically, and as well as inhale, as well as swallow. There are other ones you cannot inhale. It's dangerous to inhale based on what they put in it. So the problem is by kind of skirting around what the labeling says, then allows people and patients to think, oh, well, we can skirt around anything. And then that can lead to dangerous usage of the medicine.
That's one of my biggest concerns with compassion. Some of the products where we're like trying to, jam square peg into a round hole, where you're like, it's not exactly what you need, but like, we can make it work.
I'd like to comment on all of that too. So I think for us, like, testing is super important, and having that be available to the patient, the consumer. We don't post our tests on our website, but if someone emails us asking for it, we will openly give it to them. And the only reason we don't post it is because it has our address on it, and just with kind of what's been happening in the industry. But I think it's super important for that transparency and for someone to know what they're taking, and for us to stand by our product that we manufacture. We tend to test everything about 3 times before it makes it out to consumers. So we test both the flower, we test the concentrate, and then we test the product once it's in its final packaging to make sure. There's so many opportunities for adulteration and for something to go wrong in the process. So we want to make sure that we are consistent. And that goes with compassion stuff too. The compassion shouldn't fall into a different category because it's donated. We still test our compassion material and still make sure it's high quality, and still make sure it's something that's going to benefit the end user.
That was perfect. That was amazing dialogue. Thank you everyone so much for participating. I love it. Let's keep it on path towards the patient. So for people who don't know what titration is and the importance of titration, can someone break that down and how that can help find the right dose, or how titration helps find your proper dose?
I mean, titration should really be used on all meds, not just cannabis, but any med, because really, I mean, and I mean, Swathi's probably gonna laugh, but this is like the pharmacy go is start low and go slow. It's what we're always taught in pharmacy, and it's the education that's given in the cannabis field too. You always want to use the lowest, most beneficial dose for your ailment. So because if you keep going up, you end up getting the side effects where you're those which are usually unwanted. And so I always will use a ratio that kind of is in regards to the ailment they're going with, but I alter the ratio and the milligrams based off of the patient's response off the original. So if a patient has if a patient has chronic pain, as well as neuropathic pain, I like a 1-to-1, and I'll start with that. And I'll usually start, especially if they're cannabis naive, I'll start with a 2.5. I'll go real low, and most people will say a 2.5 does absolutely nothing for them. But you know what? My patients start on a 2.5, and if after, and they'll come back to me and say like, man, I didn't really do anything. And I'll say, okay, great. Well, because now we've tried that, we can slowly up you. Let's try the 5-to-5. And then they try that and they're like, oh, you know what? The 5-to-5 is good. My pain went away, but I'm starting to feel like a little bit groggy. Okay, great. So then either depending on the dosage, depending how the patient can tolerate, I might either increase the CBD or decrease the THC to get less of the psychological effect, more of the pain benefit. But again, that's just one patient. The problem is every patient is an individual entity. You need to treat them like an individual entity. You could have twins and they are completely different endocannabinoid system damage. And when you have different damages, you can't treat them all the same. So every patient has to be treated as an individual. So when a patient comes in asking for therapy or advice or help, the focus is not, oh, this is good. That doesn't help anybody. You need to know, okay, what are your ailments? What are you already taking? What's your labs? What's going on in your body? Okay, now that we know all that, let's start on this dose. Let's focus on this dose and ratio, and we'll slowly work together to get you on the proper dosage to help your ailment.
And I think what you brought up, Leah, that's so important is just how unique each person is. And so it really isn't like, I'm going to buy this OTC product or I'm going to get prescribed this dose. And just because it's been studied XYZ ways that, oh, it's going to work for you. And so I think that the importance of having a practitioner on board, or even if they're not, 100% there, every single time, but having access to like someone's email, someone who has that specialty, if you do have questions, I think is just so important, because I do agree that start low, go slow, even stay low, people add to that at the end. But at the same time, I think that just having access to someone that has that specialty, who has that experience with patient care, can just be so beneficial.
Yeah, I agree that a lot of inbound inquiries on different products. And I think it can be really frustrating for the consumers trying to figure out what's going to work for them, because there are so many different options out there in different ratios. I know we've done products anywhere from a 28-to-1 ratio and a 1-to-1. We have high THC products, and one thing does not work for everyone. And so I know that it does take a little bit of trial and error. And we always recommend people start with something with a CBD ratio into it. And before going right to the high THC, we make really concentrated products. And so our high THC products, even in the smallest dose, would be a pretty large dose for someone who's never used cannabis before. So.
Mandela, you wanted to say something, if I recall correctly.
I was just remembering back to my bud tender days of just always saying that you can always get higher. You can't get unhigh, but you can always get higher. So have your little dose, wait 30 minutes. If you want more, take more. If you don't, like, so I was just being taken back and just agreeing with Dr. Leah. I'm not a doctor by any means, but I just, bud tenders are not doctors, but just able to, they're that first point of contact between some sort of palliative care and education. So being able to have that little bit of, and it may sound funny, but just a little bit of, take this little piece of dose, micro dose, wait them 30 minutes. And if you want to elevate. I remember they had this club in it was a Measure Z club, one of the first in Berkeley, and had gotten a cheesecake. And one of the guys was like, do not eat this whole cheesecake in one sitting. The bottom was hash, the frosting was THC. And that happened to be one of those experiences where I happened to just overdose, and I caused myself to throw up, like, because I didn't listen. So, I just triggered that story.
So for liability's sake, when I work with any company, I have a clause that essentially the insurance companies that I work with have okayed, and the lawyers, when a bud tender gets asked how much they should take, the standard sentence that I'm allowed to legally tell them, the state's recommended dose is 10 milligrams, take 10 milligrams, wait 2 hours, decide how you feel. The end. Because giving them take more, finishing the thing is completely high liability on the retailer's part. So the answer for a bud tender, you know, if you want to say take 5 milligrams, wait 2 hours, and then maybe take 5 more, you're still within that 10. So that is fine. But as a bud tender, especially without being a doctor, you never, ever, 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 ever tell anyone to take more than 10 milligrams or what your doctor has recommended you. And that, for liability's sake, kind of keeps the bud tender, because they are not doctors. They are not pharmacists. They are people that love what they do and have a great time doing it sometimes. And some of them might be going to school to become doctors or pharmacists, but until they actually are doctors or pharmacists, we have to fall within very, very strict guidelines on liability's sake. And the state's recommended dose is 10 milligrams. Take 10 milligrams, wait 2 hours, decide how you feel.
And what I recommend for my patients is actually, so a lot of people have issues with, a lot of my patients are actually flower users, which I know depending on what they're being treated and what provider is treating them or practitioner is treating them, you'll see that different ways. But a lot of my patients were heavy THC users as children, like not children, but like as 20, you know, in their early 20s, 30s. And so now they're hitting a point of, well, I'm so used to THC, but I have ailments now. I need to fix my ailments. So what I always tell patients, or see, you know, or flower like naive patients, people who want to smoke flower, I always explain the best way to dose it is do a pea-sized amount, like a little pea, like a little green pea. And I always say take a pea-sized amount, smoke that, and then wait a good 15 minutes. If after, like, it kind of like Mandela said, if after 15 minutes, if you've tried that little bit and you're still feeling like you still need some therapy, then do another pea-sized amount. But the pea-sized amount is a good way of kind of making sure because I mean, when it comes to devices to smoke, there's a cajillion devices. So, I mean, there are ones where you can put a lot in, like a little bit in. So if you just always focus on all through my training, we've always focused on a pea-sized amount. And that way you always kind of have an idea of how that dosing works. And they also have to remember every strain is different too. And I hate strains because I honestly would rather just a list of, here's the cannabinoids, here's the terpenes in this, don't call it anything, just list the terpenes, list the cannabinoids, list everything else in it. But that's all I want to see. I don't like names, because one strain from one place to a different, they're completely different, have different profiles. So I always like the profile. But that way you can say, okay, great. Well, I tried this and it's this profile. So I would know to go back to a dispensary, get a very similar profile, and then know, okay, well, with this profile, I need to use 2 pea-sized amounts. With this profile, it's much stronger for me. I actually need to use 1 pea-sized amount. And it's a good way of kind of dosing it as well. So yeah, that's usually what flower is so hard for patients to dose. And I always try to stick with that.
Do you recommend people vaporizing rather than smoking, because just for the carcinogenic factor when you're as a doctor recommending it? Because that's something that when as like a non-doctor, I have a hard time when somebody comes to me and is like, what should I do? I'm like, well, let's go with the least negative impact, right? You light anything on fire and inhale it, it's no good. And that's the reason why vaporization is important, you know. So if they are using vaporizer, I'm having a different conversation, but like, do you guys as doctors say, hey, consider vaporizing instead of smoking?
It depends on the patient. If it's a new patient, especially my patients who have cancer, I always let them know, like, because a lot of them are not smokers usually. And a lot of them will say, you know, my nausea gets to a point where it's done. I need something that's very second. And even a tincture that will sometimes kick in about 5 to 10 minutes, that's not fast enough. So I would never, you know, for somebody who's not a smoker, I would not recommend flower for exactly that reason. I always recommend, though, a vape, and I always explain to them to make sure you check how that you got it from a reputable dispensary and you know what's in that vape. Because the biggest thing is actually the base of what they dissolve the cannabis in. If they're extracting it in compressed CO2, I'm all about that. Alcohol's fine. I try to keep my patients away from the hydrocarbons if possible. But definitely, of course, like vitamin E oil, as everybody's heard, just caused a huge problem recently.
But like vaporizing flour, like the volcano is like, I always still think about, when I think about really sick people, like I still think about, I like flour, I like the full spectrum piece. I do believe in flour or even non-solvent, based products, so you can get a lot of that entourage, the whole thing. But then lighting something on fire, I just struggle with, because that's literally one of the things on the back of the thing, the label. It's like carcinogenic because smoke. And I'm like, oh shit, yeah, it's light it on fire. Duh. I was like all mad about it. And I'm like, wait, that makes sense.
And we're in California, so everything's carcinogenic. Even Starbucks
totally.
is carcinogenic.
But lighting something on fire in general.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And that's why I would always go for a vape. But what you find with some patients, especially who have been flower users for so long, part of their actual especially if it's for relaxation, a lot of their therapy is the act of smoking for them. So I always try to recommend the vape because that's what I would prefer them to do. But at the same time, it's like you also don't want to change somebody's therapy that they're comfortable with. Like I have a colleague who was using flower specifically for just relaxation at bedtime, and decided to stop smoking altogether, but still use the therapy, but not to actually smoke. And what my colleague realized is it wasn't really causing his brain was so used to kind of relating smoking to going to bed that it became part of his sleep hygiene was smoke, bed. Smoke, bed. So without the smoke, the body just wasn't understanding it was bedtime. So he had to kind of fix all that. So luckily, and so that's why I usually recommend, try the vaping. But sometimes for some people, it's just inherent it's part of their process.
I know vaping for me is more so quick release. So yes, I love sitting down with my smoking tray, breaking down my medicine, rolling it up, being intentional with that time, maybe even saying a little prayer, but that takes time. So got my vape, bounce it in, I got my little healing right there, my CBD, whatever, and I'm out the door. So I personally love the use of both.
The vape's like the go-between. It's like the I can exist at a family function without ruining Christmas.
or sometimes like I may hit a really deep indica and I want some CBD to balance that out. So I may just end up doing both.
Yeah,
I think that brings back a point that I wanted to make, that it's also just important to educate people on different consumption methods and how that affects people. So how sublingual is going to affect you differently than if you ingest something and swallow it, and how smoking affects you differently. And so I think back to like the original question, just having so much education out there is just going to change the industry. It's going to legitimize the patient experience, and it's going to make the brands that are really focused on creating a medical product really kind of prevail and help people.
Education is key. Education is key. Oh my gosh.
My question earlier about reading the package, this is like a very drastic version of it, but suppositories. There are anal and there are vaginal suppositories, and anal suppositories don't have to have the pH perfectness that a vaginal suppository does. So if you use them wrong, they can be very bad for women's health. And I actually had a client come back and explain this in very deep detail. And that was like, holy shit, like, why didn't anybody think about that? But it's very clear on the back end. It says, pardon the pun, but it explained exactly what that was for. And we didn't use it, it was not used correctly. And like, it's a suppository. People are like, it's a suppository. I'm like, yeah, but it's not. It's not. They absorb differently. And, I personally didn't know any of those things as, not a physician or anything along those lines to fully understand. And then I went back to the manufacturer and I was like, dude, this is what happened. Like, what the heck? And they're like, oh, well, you're not supposed to do that. And I'm like, this is perfectly pH. This one's not. This one's for women's, pH balance. And this one is an anal suppository, which is a very different uptake. Everything is different. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how important that one word on that instructions of use actually were. And honestly, that was because of my lack of education. And with that said, suppositories are one of the best medicinal uses of medical cannabis that I've seen to date for both efficacy and use of money. And so I definitely, for value, and I hate being the person that always brings up, I'm always the person that brings it up, but you know what? I had vaginal cancer. When I was young, I had cervical cancer. And so I got very comfortable with having those conversations. There's products on the market. If you don't carry suppositories at a dispensary level, and if you have serious issues when it comes to colon, reproductive issues, anything like that, I highly recommend looking into it. I'm not recommending them because I'm not a doctor, but at least looking into them and seeing. And if you are a medical provider of medical cannabis, having them available and making sure that your staff understands how to have that conversation is so important, because people that are very, very sick, when we're talking about life or death, a suppository is a very, very good use of medical cannabis. I'll stop talking about butt stuff now.
Mandela.
I disagree with you, Nicole. As somebody who just lost somebody to cancer and not having the adequate education, and somebody who is educated, has their doctorate, but still choosing to opt out of these medicines, I don't know, suppository, I don't know if she would have used that, but just having the right education to medicine and actual doctors telling her the positive things about, not that, oh, this may cause something else in your body, or this may hurt something else, like alkaline water or being vegan. A doctor told my mother that these things will not help you. And of course, we all know that's not true. But again, doctors are not a part of the wellness system. Not doctors, hospitals. I'm sorry, but hospitals. And that's why, what are you going to say? No.
No, actually, I was going to say you're totally right. And the only thing I was also going to say, and I always feel bad because I always bring this up. So if there are any providers on this call, I apologize. But I have worked with some great providers, but I have worked with a lot more providers who do not know how to prescribe meds. And I always explain this, pharmacists and even nurses, nurses, pharmacists, we get more education about pharmacology than providers do. Providers, NPs, PAs, physicians, they get 1 semester of pharmacology. Through pharmacy school, I can't speak, I apologize, Casey, I can't speak on behalf of nurses because I haven't been in the nursing program, but I know for pharmacists, every single semester of pharmacy school, especially in your last year, you have therapeutics, which is pharmacology, and then you've got a medchem, so you've got the information of how the drugs, need to be utilized in the body and which ones to use, but then you're also taught, once they're in there, how are they actually working? And this is the information that providers, the ones that actually write the prescriptions, know nothing about. So that's like the really weird background thing is you have healthcare professionals who are literally educated in medicine. And these are not the people who prescribe the medicine to the patients, which makes no sense.
And in addition to, I wanted to say that the endocannabinoid system and cannabis science in general is not a part of the core curricula of any healthcare professional in the US right now. That's changing, which is amazing. And there are tons of elective courses that are popping up here and there and master's programs and all the things, but within healthcare professional programs, like what Leah mentioned, like nursing, pharmacy, MD, NP, you name it, all the little acronyms, none of those involve cannabis science as something that is a system that you learn about just like you learn about other systems. So saying something like, oh, ask your doctor honestly might not know, and they likely won't know. So just having an idea of which specialists you can count on and just having their email or their website can just be so useful.
And what you'll find out about a lot of these providers is they will say the reason why they probably gave you the information of, oh, that doesn't work, is because it's easier to say it doesn't work than I don't know about that. Because think about it. Would you rather a doctor say, I don't know, or would you rather them say, oh, it doesn't work? Because they need to look like they know what they're talking about. So, to say, I always say, I'm very transparent. If I don't know something, I'd be like, you know what, that's a great question. I honestly don't work in that area. I don't know about that, but that is a great information. That's something that I would definitely look into, and I'll get back to you. it's better to help our patients with learning for ourselves. And I think it's a disservice to our patients to not put that effort in. And what we should do is, if you don't know the answer, don't say to your patient it's a bad thing. Say, I apologize, I'd like to look more into that before I get back to you on that subject. That way you still look like you know what you're talking about, but it just seems like you want to put the effort to help your patient. And I mean, I'm sure with timing, with nowadays with doctors seeing patients within 15 minutes or less, I'm sure is making a big problem with that as well. But that's what I always say is, at the end of the day, you know, don't just tell your patient it's bad unless you know it's bad because you've done the research.
Right.
Yeah, and I just wanted to toss in my 2 cents. I'm glad people are talking about the endocannabinoid system. You know, we talked about this the other day on our test call. And the endocannabinoid system was discovered in 1969. In 2019, we had the 50th anniversary of the discovery of the endocannabinoid system, and there was zero media about it. The endocannabinoid system is not really being taught to doctors right now. And so that's another thing for our kind of public awareness campaign, is to try to educate the populace, and especially doctors and people in the medical field, about the endocannabinoid system, because it's the system that runs all of our other systems. So if you want to just pick one system in your body to run at tip-top condition, you're going to want it to be the endocannabinoid system. But the doctors don't know about it. And so, yeah. That's my 2 cents.
I think to bounce off of that, Joe, like in the hospital, there's still a big disconnect with cannabis as medicine. It's still listed in someone's medical record as a substance abuse, and they'll introduce a patient on rounds as a cannabis user, instead of highlighting how they're using it medicinally to help alleviate symptoms. So I think there's still a lot of education that needs to be done. And I'm so glad that Dr. Leah and Dr. Swathi are here to kind of put their 2 cents in, because I think it's really important to have providers who are educated and on board with this.
That re-education for all of the industry, no matter where you sit at. Folks need to, I had to relearn myself, you know, and just seeing it from a one-to-one standpoint, and actually watching somebody go through this, and just, I'm learning all this knowledge and you won't even use it yourself. Is crazy. So I am really thankful for both of y'all to just be in y'all's presence and hear what y'all have to say, because that's uplifting the people in so many ways.
So kind of tying it back to educating our consumers, and not many people know this, but I want to bring it up so that we can hopefully break it down. What is the entourage effect, and why is it important to choose full spectrum products? If we can kind of even break that down.
I want to hear from Casey since she works with it.
Yeah, so we pretty much exclusively make full spectrum products. And so what that means is we try to retain the plant's original profile. Things that are like distillates that are in a lot of vape products, they're really stripping down to either THC or CBD or the cannabinoids that they're trying to put into that product. And you're losing the terpenes and the flavonoids that have a synergistic effect with the cannabinoids in the product to get a medical effect. So it's super complicated because there are so many factors in each plant. And as we've discussed before, there's each varietal is a little bit different, the terpene profile. I also agree with Dr. Leah. I do not like strains. We do sell things as strain specific and market it that way because people tend to identify something that works for them and want to look for it again. But I don't really love putting purple panty goo on a medical product. And so for me, I wish that we could kind of move away from that and move towards like, this is the cannabinoid profile and these are the terpene profiles and these are the flavonoids in this particular product. I totally agree with that. But we find that all of the different components of the product really work for different people and different ailments. There's certain products that will work really well for someone with MS that work differently with someone who's trying to alleviate pain from cancer or nausea and vomiting. And it's really identifying kind of what works for you.
Totally agree. And the only thing I was also going to add is some of my patients are, I do not want THC. I will not take THC. I want THC to be nowhere near me because I'm afraid of many different things. And what I'll say to them is I would still, like, you know, like Casey was saying, the entourage effect is so important. So I would take I always tell them, well, at least take a broad spectrum. A broad spectrum is the same thing as a full spectrum, just without the THC. And then that way, just like Casey was saying, you're still getting the terpenes, you're still getting all the other benefits of the plant as itself. And it's so good. What you find is when you start stripping the plant to its specific cannabinoids and actually get isolates and distillates, you find that it's actually not as effective. And a lot of pharmaceutical companies have tried to utilize it in the past with that way. Like, for example, Epidiolex is a isolate of CBD. So the problem with that, though, is that it leads to potential side effects because the plant has protective properties to it. So it actually protects you while you're inhaling or ingesting these different properties. So when you're just focusing on just one chemical and not the whole plant, that's where the danger comes in. So that's why that's why the full spectrum or full spectrum, in my opinion, is the best, even if it's really low THC. I'd still take that over the broad spectrum, but if you're not going to do full spectrum, I say at least broad spectrum.
And I think it's important for people to know too that if you buy a product that is made with distillate, but it's also labeled to have terpenes or labeled to be full spectrum, a lot of times those terpenes are reintroduced at the end and they're not necessarily from the original plant, and they can be synthetic. And so it's important to know, like, is this a full plant extract that has gone through like limited processing, or is this a distillate that had terpenes reintroduced that may have come from a different source, and kind of what you're getting in your product. But all of it still comes back to just being really educated on the products.
Yeah, and with that too, in my experience working with patients, when I've had the chance to explain that, you know, full spectrum really only includes up to that 0.3%, that legal limit put forth by the Farm Bill in 2018. So sometimes when I've actually just explained it like that and said, really, it's just such a miniature amount of what you're going to take, actually some patients have changed their mind, because I think that when they see, oh, full spectrum, oh goodness, it's going to have THC, they just like assume it's going to be like 50% of it or something. So I think even just that aspect of education has been really, really useful.
Last year, there's something that I found kind of interesting. Raphael Meshulam has been doing some really amazing research the past couple of years. I mean, the most amazing research since 1966, I guess. He's, for those who are listening, not aware, he's the person who sequenced the cannabis genome, THC, CBD, like he's literally like the godfather of cannabis science. Recently, at one of his speeches, did say, you know, everyone keeps talking about the entourage effect, but the entourage is one very important person that everyone follows. It's an ensemble effect. We all work together. And it's important. I thought about that and it really changed my mind in such a big way, because that would be THC is the star, and it's not. We've been looking at it wrong. We almost got rid of THC due to our genetic choices because it wasn't getting us high anymore. And so we were like, getting CBD out of the way. We were almost got rid of it on like a level that we were, you know, having it. And I guess theoretically they're saying that it's the predominant cannabinoid. We just like kind of screwed up by, you know, pushing it out by getting as much of the THC as we could in the CBD factor. But in that same thought process, it totally makes sense, because I had always looked at THC as the star, but it's like, that's not necessarily the case. And the ensemble effect just made such a different, like, it's music at that point. It's not a fucking celebrity in LA being like their entourage behind them of all the cannabinoids and the terpenes, you know, it's a symphony and they're all working together. And I thought that was really beautiful.
Thank you for that. So what is RSO and why do we use it?
Oh, I have a fun one on this. So Rick Simpson oil, RSO, is not what you're actually talking about. You're talking about it. Most of the time, people don't realize they're having RSO conversations. RSO, which was made by Rick Simpson, Phoenix Tears was another term that it was used as, was originally made using a product called naphtha. And if anybody knows what naphtha is, naphtha was used to remove varnish off of hardwood floors. It was one of the gnarliest chemicals. Rick Simpson used to go to Ace Hardware and get the shit in fucking buckets with skull and crossbones on the front. And as long as you reduce it all out and let it off gas, you know, much like butane and propane, you're not ending up with something super crazy. We've evolved a fuck ton since then as far as what we're looking at. RSO is a colloquialism for a full spectrum extraction oil. It is not, RSO is a fun term. I mean, it is about as funny in my mind as somebody thinking they could sue Raw Gardens for it's not live resin. Like, tell me what live resin is. That's cute. That's cute. Find a document that's like, this is exactly what live resin is on a science term. It doesn't exist. There's no way you can tell me it was wrong because that's not a real thing. And so Rick Simpson oil in that same breath is not an exact, right? Rick Simpson oil is not an exact thing. It's a theory of the way that Rick Simpson brought all of this shit together and made a full spectrum oil to treat cancer. And so now we've got an evolution of full spectrum oils, and what's happening, which is it's literally like the Kleenex facial tissue conversation. Everyone's asking for a motherfucking Kleenex, but it's a facial tissue, right? Kleenex is the brand. Rick Simpson oil is the brand. It is not the product. And it is very important to understand and differentiate the two, because there are a lot of really great full spectrum oil manufacturers in this space that are not trying to steal the fucking legacy of Rick Simpson by putting RSO on it, and they're respectful. Thank you for being respectful and not putting RSO on your package, because that's not what it is. You're not Rick Simpson. It's not Rick Simpson oil, and hopefully you're not using motherfucking naphtha.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. I actually, one of my patients got frustrated with me because they were focusing on Rick Simpson oil, and I was like, so you mean a tincture? And or you mean like a concentrate? And they're like, no, Rick Simpson oil. And like, it was just a term that she had heard, and she doesn't understand that it, like you're saying, it is like saying, it's like whenever he says, oh, I need a Kleenex, you need a tissue. You don't need a Kleenex.
Chapstick. Chapstick's the brand.
Exactly. You know, and that's the whole thing, is it's totally misrepresented. And not to mention, even on, like, if you actually go to the Rick Simpson's like website, he's like, dude, like don't follow me. I'm not special. Like, I'm just somebody who figured this out. Here's the recipe. Leave me alone. Like, pretty much he like even posted the recipe of how he makes it, so that you, like, in other words, this is a recipe for making a concentrate. Make your own concentrate, enjoy, goodbye. Like, I mean, and I don't blame him. I mean, I would do the same thing. It's like, the whole thing is, it's a concentrate, and it's all in this field. My biggest problem I have is terminology. It kills me, because terminology is seriously my biggest pet peeve. I am so sick of when people say, oh, well, this is from hemp extract for products that are 0.3% THC or less. And it's like, well, where did you get the oil? Oh, well, it's from cannabis oil. So it's not hemp oil. It is cannabis oil. However, they are not allowed to ship it through the mail if it doesn't say the words hemp. And that's what bothers me, because at the end of the day, I would want cannabis oil, full spectrum, low THC, like a 0.3 THC, than a hemp, because the hemp plants usually is not as effective as as using like the cannabis. I know people are going to say, well, they're the same plant, but there are slight differences between specifically the hemp plant and specifically the medicinal plant. And you find that there are more cannabinoids, more terpenes in the medicinal plant than the hemp. And there's nothing against hemp. I love the hemp plant too, but you kind of recognize the difference with the effect when you know exactly where it's coming from. But just to get around those regulations, they put the wrong information on the label. And I think that's a big problem that I'm seeing is bad information is not helping patients figure out what really works for them.
Yeah, I think for us, we use the terms RSO and full spectrum oil and concentrate kind of interchangeably, because we do get people coming in specifically looking for RSO. And then we kind of educate them that we're not using rice cookers and naphtha to make our products. We're using scientific equipment and making sure it's safe. But I think that there's just a lot on the Dr. Google about RSO and the benefits for it. And that's how people recognize the product that is a full spectrum concentrate.
Thank you so much, panelists. Joe, do you still have your hand up? Or
oh yeah, I was just gonna say I like saying Rick Simpson oil. I know, I've made it and given it to some of our patients as well. And I made it with organic alcohol and reclaimed the alcohol in a still. It's a lot more professional than a rice cooker. But yeah, I mean, I just love Rick Simpson. Run from the Cure was a great documentary. I totally cried in it. And just that, these like country bumpkins in Canada, the guy like remembered seeing some news show from 20 years before, from the 70s. And he's like, oh, I have skin cancer. Maybe I'll try to make this. And just like came out of nowhere. And like now this guy is, travels the world. I do stuff in Eastern Europe, like I mentioned, my circus project. And, Rick Simpson is huge in Croatia. Like he does tours and speaks at colleges and stuff. And I'm just like, wow, this old guy who was just a farmer, I'm like, he's, really changed the face of how we're dealing with cancer and other, medical issues. And so for me, and it's just me, everybody else, we all got our own issues with RSO or whatever, but I am always going to call it Rick Simpson oil. I love Rick Simpson. And sorry, that's my 2 cents. I hope I didn't upset anyone.
No, not at all. So when we look towards the future, when we look towards the future, the industry, the future of safe access, what can we work to change? Well, I'm sorry. What can we do to help change for better? I'm so sorry. Why am I dyslexic? Just is going off right now. All right. What can we do to help shape better regulations?
That's a tough one. The better question is, how do we get people to listen to the education? Like, I mean, the education's
Amazing.
there. It's just they're going out of their way not to listen to it. And that's really the question, is how do you get this information into the brains of people who are not willing to listen?
Can I respond to that?
And, yeah, of course, please.
So Black Canada Joy's approach to getting education is really pretty magical, because we're not coming at it as, we want you to get high, we want you to get well. So centering around joy, Black joy, even before we get to the cannabis. So we want you well. We want you to do some yoga. We want you to get a massage. We want you to, take some time to, something. So I would say for us, the future is getting into more of these other legal states. This land that we sit on is an indigenous land. And it's Black folks from that side to that side, to up and to down. So I really want to do the work that I'm continuing to do, is to let me go to Oklahoma. I got family out there too. Let me go to Mississippi. I got family out there too. They've been hit by racism, Bible Belt, like all that stuff, like queer, trans, like from the top to the bottom. So I see the future as having more SB 34 programs, partnering with other programs, having bigger events, bigger panels. Like we can go to these different countries. You know what I'm saying? Like, Joe, I'm down to travel. What's up? Like, I'm a musician all day. So, like let's put these things together. I think changing how we give the education, like as an artist, we make things exciting. So let's make this education exciting. Let's have some concerts. Let's, do a virtual something, but we can't keep it stale. And that's how we lose people, by making it stale. Like, I don't want to hear another person doing a PowerPoint presentation. Like, how about your presentation, you smoke with me and tell me what you're smoking and we can smoke together. You feel me? We on Zoom. Like, I can do whatever in my house, right? Like,
I totally agree with you. And I love it. I also was thinking that people also need to, for lack of better terms, and I hate saying this as a woman, but we need to man up. Like, if you're an advocate of cannabis, don't back down. Don't oh yeah, I'm kind of in cannabis and hide. No, be straightforward. Talk about it straightforward, like a medicine. Talk about it like you would talk about your prescription that you just got over the counter. And and that's what I find is that I've talked to so many advocates, and I'm like on my LinkedIn, I'm like, oh my God, I have all these connections, all these everybody's such advocates, but it's not happening. So I think people just need to just yell about it, scream it from the top, like, yeah, I'm a medicinal cannabis activist. And you know what? This is what we need to do to get our patients better. We need to work together. We need to support each other. And we need to explain that cannabis is a medication. It's here to stay. It's been here longer than any pharmaceutical that we use currently on the market, because
Normalize it.
yeah. So it needs to go to a point where people aren't getting arrested for it. There's no, people don't get arrested for getting a prescription medication. Why? People shouldn't be tested for cannabis for their jobs. Just like you can't be, if you have an opioid that pops up on a drug test, you can say I have a prescription for it. Same thing. They shouldn't test it, but if they're gonna test it, at least if you've got like the reason for using it, it's a medicinal medicine. There's just no reason to be doing this to people and to like make people feel like and act like a criminal because they're like, oh God, like, I mean, in California, everything is so liberal, but if I go to a different state, I realize, like, I say to a patient, like, why can't you just like go out into a dispensary? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you can't just go get your medicine. No, like, I have to go call Rob down the street, who's going to drive up in a car, and I'm going to sneak in quickly and I'm going to get something and run it. Like, that's ridiculous. If we utilize it and treat it like a street drug, it's always going to be seen like a street drug. It's a medicine. We need to advocate for it. We need to be excited about it and say, this is a great medicine. We are supportive of it.
So, Stephen, I was actually going to bring this up to you. I am just finishing my terpene wrap. I've been working on it for about 6 weeks now. It's really hard to get beta-caryophyllene to rhyme with other things, but I've gotten it. And I would like to produce my song and maybe make a video out of it. And it's silly and it's ridiculous, but I think it will help educate people on some of the different things. And I started thinking outside of the box, and I started recently working with this suppository company. And that's kind of why I'm bringing this up again, is having those conversations, even the awkward ones, are so important. And being able to get through and be comfortable to have those conversations, to explain to people the, use of certain products that might not feel like something that you would normally do when we're having like a real medicinal conversation. And I finally realized how, like, I literally felt like the School of Rock, where I'm like, how do I get through to these kids? Where I'm like, how do I get, because I want to be able to train. I do a lot of training for entry-level staff. And so my reality, my disconnect is the fact that the people that are talking to these people making the purchases don't know enough about terpenes, don't have the ability to have a comfortable conversation about a suppository. And so I'm just like, I have to get through. I need to talk to millennials so that they can have a conversation with grandma. And I'm trying to bridge the gap where the millennials understand all of the things so that they can explain it to grandma in a way that makes her want to take that next step. Because I think a lot of people's, I was having the conversation on a Clubhouse the other day in a large marketing room, and they were like, tell the millennials that love their grandparents about it and why this is important, so the millennials can go talk to their grandparents. Don't have the conversation about them using suppository. Talk to the 23-year-olds about how, if your grandma has, any issues, here's a leaflet. If your grandpa, prostate cancer, well, here's a leaflet about some information, to be able to just have the conversation to get it to them. I think bridging the gap is a very important piece, because a lot of the things that we need medicine for are older people, and the people that are talking about it are younger people, and they're not speaking the same language, and semantics and the words that we're using, and the stuck on RSO, stuck on the need for that, those words, I think are and Joe, I'm not offended by it. I just think it does a disservice to the industry of people seeing that it's more than just Rick Simpson oil, that product, like, because people do get stuck on the idea of that. And so when having that Rick Simpson oil conversation, just to explain what that means, I think is important too, what Rick Simpson oil means. It's not like specific to Rick Simpson, and it's not, it's a version of that.
Yeah. Joe, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So going to the question that you raised, future stuff, I'm going to set my stopwatch here because I could probably just like talk about this for a while. So if I am talking too much, feel free to to interject. So, we learned a lot of stuff with SB 829 and SB 34. In 2018, when we started down this road of, trying to create laws to protect compassion, a number of things came up. People were suggesting to me, they're like, oh, why don't you look at Washington, Oregon, and Colorado, because they've already legalized. What did those compassion people in those states do to protect compassion? And what happened is nothing really, nobody organized around it. And so compassion in all those states pretty much disappeared. And at the time, there was like one compassion program that I knew of in Washington state that was doing $100,000 of compassion annually. And what that made me realize and think about is that, California, we were the first to do medical. We are the trailblazers. It's important for us to get laws like this on the book because we set the pace for the rest of the country and also for the rest of the world. So what we do here has major impact around the globe. And so when we realized that compassion was disappearing in these recreational markets, we were like, oh, now it's really important. I talked to Ryan Miller from Operation Evac when I first met him 2018. And I was like, look, I don't know how long this is going to take. All I know is I'm not going to stop until we figure this out because patients are dying because they don't have access to the cannabis. And so, rolling forward, SB 34, I'm, in this meeting in Sacramento at the Capitol with Lori Ajax, head of the BCC, head of the CDTFA, Nicole Elliott was there, like all these people were there. And CDTFA at that time, they were really hesitant about this bill because they had come up with some numbers. I think they pulled them out of thin air, but they thought that 25 to 50% of the cannabis in the industry was going to go to compassion and they were going to lose a major amount of taxes. Now that's not the case. I have always worked under the assumption that compassion is less than 1% of our industry. And so what we're seeing now, one of the things that I wanted to bring up is now we have Metric in 2020 where they have been logging compassion. We actually now can try to get these numbers. I've been reaching out to people in the government. I'm trying to get these numbers because how much compassion is actually going through Metric? Because the government is going to be real hesitant to make things tax-free if they think they're losing millions of dollars of taxes. But if it's not that, then they'll be willing to work with us more. I noticed in the chat section, someone had brought up, it's important to get 501c3 nonprofit status for compassion programs. Currently, if you're handling cannabis, you're not allowed to be a nonprofit because of cannabis is a Schedule I substance. So that needs to be addressed. Another thing in the chat was about medical insurance. Insurance providers should be covering cannabis. They cover pharmaceuticals, or at least give people a deductible so they don't have to pay for all of it. These are really important things. Now, again, going back to California setting the stage for compassion, now we're seeing stuff happen at the federal level, and we need to get involved in that discussion. We don't want to see a similar situation like Prop 64, where the federal government makes these laws and they forget about the nonprofit sector of our industry. So it's really important time period right now for us to be involved in that. And then, finally is getting tax credits to businesses that are participating in compassion. It'd be great to do it on a federal level, but first we can start with California. And that's another reason why we want to get these 2020 compassion numbers, because when we can quantify what it looks like, we're gonna get a lot more support if these people aren't afraid that they're losing, $100 million in taxes. What I want to tell these politicians is my patients, either they get free cannabis and they don't pay taxes, or they don't get any cannabis because they can't afford it, and they don't pay taxes. So the equation is the government is not getting any tax money from these people. They shouldn't be worried about it. And so, we want to do like California state tax credits. And I wanted to do that bill, starting this year, because we could get the 2020 numbers. But now, due to COVID and all these issues with the budget, doing some sort of tax reform or getting people tax credit, I do not think the government is going to go for right now because they don't have the money. And so, it's like timing for this. It's us all understanding that this is what we're going to be working on for the foreseeable future. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to keep doing this. And yeah, that's what I got.
I like
Thank
the
you.
comment too, if that's okay. For us, I feel like the components are there to kind of move SB 34 and compassion forward. Our local government really wants the cannabis businesses to be involved in donating products. There are so many farmers that want to get this out there. I mean, I think the cannabis industry was built on like neighbors helping neighbors and all of that. And then we meet so many retailers and so many distributors, and we're a manufacturer, and we're so happy to do these projects. I think what's missing is what Dear Cannabis has really done, which is kind of bridging it, putting everything together and coordinating it. And I think having organizations or funding to be able to like put all these things together, like how do we get packaging? How do we get all these people to talk to each other about compassion and kind of streamline that pipeline? So we've been super happy with what Dear Cannabis has done. I keep pushing our local government, like if you want donation and compassion, like bring it up to to the state level and start talking about it. I mean, it's easy to talk to the farmers and the businesses and say, hey, you need to do donation when they're talking kind of down the pipeline, but like bring it up, tell the state that we need that, and it needs to be a priority.
I really think what Pam is doing with the LBCA in a very big way is going to be how we make change, because what Pam has done has really aligned the program that Dear Cannabis is providing with the ability to do that back end work to say that we've done all the vetting of those patient members. And so at that point, when we roll out the program, it's very concise. Here's the list of people that have gone through the approval. This is what it looks like. And so when you can have like a clear line, when we talk to government officials, I have bridged the gap to the dark side at this point, and I definitely do go talk to government officials. It works a lot better when I'm able to say, step A, step B, here's the list, step C, bada bing, this is how we move forward. And once we're able to do that, it really does create, why are you saying no again? Not only for the elected officials, but for the dispensaries and the businesses that are or are not providing medicine to people that need it, right? So when we roll it out very clean, where we understand, here's the list. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to follow the exact list of every type of person, but here's every qualifying, here's the things that we've worked out, here's what it looks like to be able to just have kind of a plug and play answer. And saying, if you want to work outside of the guise of this and run your own program, no one's telling you that you can't, but here's a program that we've made sense of, right? And what Pam has done has been so freaking beautiful, because it takes, and at some point, if we had automation, the right software, it wouldn't have to take a person to do as much of the going through it. But you go to the website, you go to LBCA, and you submit your information, as a patient, your verification. And so then Pam verifies everything, which is on the SB 34, the requirements for those non-MMIC, that you take that extra step, right? You are required by law to take that extra step on that non-MMIC medical verification. And so Pam's doing all of this for the people within the LBCA that want to roll out a program at their dispensaries. So when you decide at the LBCA program level, hey, I want to be a compassion person, you just step up and you're like, all right, Pam, tell me which days. And Pam will be like, on Saturdays and Tuesdays, people will come by from these hours to these hours. Here's your approved people, and here's the products that they'll get. And you're like, sweet, thanks, Pam. And the products are coming in. The people are already approved. We've got a little checklist. And I'm like, bada bing, bada boom. I show my front desk people. I'm like, here's the checklist. Here's the people that are approved. Here's their file. Get them through, get them their product. Here's their packages. move it forward. And when we have something that's very clean like that, we create something that the government can digest on a process. And so that, in my mind, in a big way, in a big way, what Pam is doing is going to be how we get that change that we're looking for, to get that next step, right? Taking her training and her experience in public work and government work, and how to get a process through on social programs. She's running it just like that. And that's going to be how we get the government to pay attention and participate with us, is if we participate in their arena and line up in the way that we get programs through. And I'm so freaking thankful for Pam and the work that she's doing in that, because we're going to be able to roll it out where the LBCA, obviously the companies can make their own decisions on if they're sticking to the MMIC to get started, or if they're opening it up to everybody. But then they already have pre-vetted people, and it separates that ethics, or that piece where the dispensary has to make the decision who qualifies for free medicine, right? This isn't I'm now part of the program. Yes, you go to this website and qualify. And if you qualify, then you get to come to us, and I'm one of the stores, and here's the days that you can come. Thank you. Because otherwise, the actual applicability and the way to do this for very busy, strong stores, which are the ones we want to participate, is not there. We can't just be like, first 100 people come through and get some fucking free weed. Like, that's not going to work out. That's not going to fucking work. We're going to have a riot. Has anybody ever said free anything? My dad had a band when I was young called Free Beer, because he thought it would be a great idea. The marquee said free beer. The people would show up. They did. And they threw the fucking $6 beers at the people because there were no free beers. It did not work out as well. And so having a process to say, here's the steps and the safety, I think that is going to be how we get change.
Yeah, and I agree. Huge thank you to Pam for everything that she does and continues to do selflessly. So thank you. Mandela, I noticed your hand's been up. I'd love to take it to you.
I've just been hearing what everybody's been saying, and just been a great joy to just be a part of this community right now. We're all doing something to help our community. And I feel that, I look forward. Instead of saying bye to my dad. But I look forward to this community, and I want to have some action items. I don't want to just talk on a panel and say all these wonderful things for support, and I don't see any of you all again. I feel that we've been brought together to make action, to make something come of what each of our programs support. You know what I'm saying? Because as a person who is in that community that has suffered for the drug war, I don't really want to see another panel. I don't want to see another person telling me what I need. I want to see some action. Like me and Joe are out here on these streets. You know what I'm saying? Joe was one of the first persons that actually reached out to me and was like, what are you doing? What is this Black Canna Joy thing? I'm just like, yo, this is what it is. He was like, oh my gosh, where have you been all my life? I'm just like, dude, I've been right here. Like, our people want to see action.
Love what you do. I love what you do.
I love what you do, yo. You've actually donated to our box to be able to give some stuff to our people. Like, that's big, yo. You were like, fuck it, I'm gonna just do it. Like,
dude, we're all in this together. Compassion is a group effort.
And we have to bring it back to that. We can't get so high up in wanting to be like these big companies that we become these big companies. Like, I am here to make sure that grandma, uncle, daughter, whatever they're going through, gets what they need, and they can go about their daily lives, And that's what makes Black Canna Joy so beautiful. It was community inspired, One of our pickup locations is a garden, Like, come to a garden, come be around plants while you're getting your plants. You know what I'm saying? Like, just to take a break from your daily life and just to be with joy. Like, I'm gonna keep pushing that, like, all day, every day. And for those of you on this call that are seeing us, please tap in. Our Instagram is Black Canna Joy. If you want to sign up for a box, if you want to donate to the program, like, all that information goes that way. And again, I'm just thankful to just be here. Dr. Swati actually led a talk. I go to Amsterdam. You're one of my lecturers. That's pretty cool to see you on the call. But yeah, yo, like, I love what everybody has said, and I just want to, let's work together. Let's make something happen from this call,
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I want to say thank you to everyone, not only the panelists, but everyone who's here tuned in, everyone's watching. Thank you so much. We're closing in on 3:30. I would just like to open it up for any questions, anyone in the chat, or if anyone would like to bring anything up. But again, thank you so much for being here and everyone for your advocacy. We appreciate it. Ishka, I recall you have some announcements.
I do. Yeah, I thought we'd wait a little bit, but let me go ahead and get started. If anyone has any questions while I'm going through them, feel free to put them in the chat. So just really to let you guys know some of the SB 34 events and programs that are coming up. I know in March, Weed for Warrior has 3 events going on, one on the 27th at the People's Remedy in Lone Palm, Modesto, on the 28th at AHHS in West Hollywood, on the 29th at the California Street Cannabis in San Francisco. And then in April, it looks like it will be April 1st at Grupo in Salinas. So excited, to see already a lot of different events and things going on where people are going to be able to get their medication. I know Cannabis Works has an event planned for March 27th and 28th down here in Santa Ana. And that is going to be their monthly SB 34 pickup. Cannabis Works patients and veterans who are looking to participate should contact Shelly over there at Cannabis Works. She's amazing. So shout out Shelly. Operation Evac. Operation Evac's mission is to support the growth and healing of veterans through mutual assistance, personal development, and community service. They host online veteran support meetings every Monday and Wednesday at 8 p.m., as well as Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. For more information on how to join, please go to www.opevac.org. And those are just a few different things that are going on that we have to look forward to. So I would like to thank everyone here today. Nicole, I know that at first you thought you wouldn't have much to contribute, but you certainly did. So thank you, Miss Nicole West, who definitely was a huge factor behind the scenes on this, as well as, yes, Pam with the LBCA. We love you, Pam. And just really excited to have all of you here today. And yes, definitely agree, Mandela. It's conversations like these that get things started, but let's be able to see what action we can
push it forward.
Keep going.
Push it forward.
So thank you all.
Joe, it says you have one announcement.
Yeah. Well, I also wanted to chime in too. So Sweet Leaf, we have been getting some larger donations that are close to expiration. So it's more product than our program can work through. And so we have been doing compassion distribution to other compassion programs. Like Mandela mentioned, and that was the thing, I've been looking.
Shout out Padre Moo.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Padre Moo is who we all work with. Mandela works with them. Also Ryan Miller in Operation Evac, who was just mentioned, he works with Padre Moo. Padre Moo works with Sweet Leaf, also with Munchie Movement, which is a small compassion program in the Bay. They go to homeless encampments and they bring the homeless people food and free cannabis.
Yes.
And so Sweet Leaf, we've been helping source product for all these different groups, but we're also sourcing product for a therapeutic alternative in Sacramento. They have a compassion program, as well as Cornerstone and the Higher Path in SoCal. All of those places have compassion programs. So if people are looking for compassion, you can check those places out. I'm not sure what their qualifications are. I know it's not like just veterans only program. I believe it's probably low income, but yeah, check into that. And then, and so that leads into my other announcement, which is this week, Sweet Leaf is in the process of taking in 3 different compassion donations that have a combined retail value of over $500,000. And these products are expiring late May to mid-June. And so we're hoping in the next week or two to get this all out to all of our we call it Team Compassion, is kind of like our informal kind of network of compassion programs. You know, we're all in this together. We're working as a team, and
superheroes.
And so yeah, so we're hoping that by the end of March, we also got another big donation from Kinslips and Olo that was like $150,000-$200,000 donation. We got all that out. So if we get this $500,000, or actually, I guess, well, anyway, when we deal with with 2 of the 3 donations that are coming in now, the total that we'll be at by the end of March, provided we can get all this out, is over $500,000 of compassion in 2021. And our goal for 2021 is to hit $1 million worth of compassion. Half of that is going to go to Sweet Leaf patients, and the other half is going to be going to support other compassion programs. And so, you know, we were really lucky organizing with SB 829 and SB 34 because it brought together a lot of us. None of us got paid for any of that work. So it really showed, you know, we're all in this and we're in it for the long haul. And we basically, Team Compassion sort of like popped up out of that. And so that's what I foresee happening. You know, I love Dear Cannabis as well, because Dear Cannabis is the first compassion manufacturing brand. Like nobody's done that before. It's so awesome. And what I'm seeing is, you know, we need compassion at like all these different levels of the supply chain. So, you know, we got Dear Cannabis doing compassion manufacturer. So when I get some product, and we've already done this once with some tinctures, I got some distillate, I got it to Dear Cannabis, and, you know, we split it to go to our compassion patients. So, you know, when people get like a donation of 100 pounds of trim, call Dear Cannabis, you know. And then, you know, if people have large donations to get out and it's a limited time period, you know, give me a call and we can do it. And yeah, it's just, it's really great because I just see this happening more and more. You know, this is only the end of the first year of SB 34, and it seems like it's in a really good place, and it's in a place to blow up even more. And, you know, millions of Californians qualify for compassion. There's millions of people just in our state. I mean, in the whole world, it's hundreds of millions. And, you know, that's a lot of work. We got a lot to do here. So on that note, let's all just keep up the good work.
Keep this thing going. Let's not fall off, you know.
I just wanted to hop on real quick and say, yes, Joe, we're echoing your sentiments. And also to shout out to Casey and Emerald Bay. They've provided a huge chunk of the manufacturing work for all of the FSO we've been able to get out to patients. So without her team, we wouldn't have been able to get a lot of the projects off the ground. And they did sacrifice a lot of their staff and nights and to make sure that this product was, the source material was processed into product that was great for the patients. So we really appreciate you, Casey, and your team over at Emerald Bay, and thank you to all the panelists that have been on today. You've all been phenomenal and had such great insights, and we've all been so lucky to hear you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. It is now 3:37. If the host or anyone does not have any last comments, I just want to say thank you so much on behalf of the LBCA. Thank you so much on behalf of Dear Cannabis. We appreciate everyone's time, and we appreciate, we're looking forward to rolling out this project, not only here in Long Beach, but throughout the state, and we can do it without amazing people like you. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. Don't forget to follow everyone on social media. Dear Cannabis, the LBCA, Cannabis Babes, everyone else in between. Please feel free to drop your social media handles in the chat, but have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.